The first noise Adam heard of the town was of a crowd. He eyed the flow of people and didn't want to get swept up with them. Slipping into an alley, he made his way through town. Except his path was blocked once more by a parade. Sitting atop a platform was a green man in gold. He watched in awe of the deity before him, for that was who this was, Osiris. Even he found himself following along with the crowd and festivities. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. Today, we turn to one of the gods of Egypt, Osiris, one of the more influential deities. It's amazing that I haven't touched on any of Egyptian myths yet. So let's look at one of the key forces which drove Egyptian mythology. Osiris, or also called the Mighty One. Osiris is shown with green skin from his resurrection, but occasionally black, associated with death. He is seen wearing a crown called an atef, comprised of 2 ostrich feathers, 2 horns, and another crown called a hejet. He holds a crook like a shepherd, and a flail or whip. He is the eldest son of Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. I'm not going to go over the long, convoluted story that this part is. It involves gambling, and the Egyptians accurately counting the Earth's year-long rotation. His birth marked a change in Egypt. He was born with his atef already on his head, as Ra declared him the next ruler from birth. A man named Pamades heard Osiris' first cry and went to spread the good word. For his actions, he was made young Osiris' teacher. In time, Osiris would come to rule Egypt. Now, before he took the throne, Egypt wasn't a great land. Cannibalism and barbarism ran rampant. It was a wild and savage land, which Osiris tamed. He taught agriculture for grapes, wheat, barley, and with them, how to create copper tools, the first steps of civilization. He would rule Egypt for years, but in time, he wanted to spread his influence. First, he went to Ethiopia. Now, this doesn't mean the country located at Africa's Horn, but it was a term used for all of sub-Saharan Africa at the time. Yet his influence here did offend one of the African queens, which comes into play after a while. After his trip through Africa, Osiris went to India, though he didn't leave Egypt leaderless. His wife and sister Isis oversaw Egypt in his stead. But he had other siblings, a brother known as Set or Seth. Set was married to Nephthys, but she was unfaithful. She disguised herself as Isis and seduced Osiris. In time, she would give birth to Anubis, the jackal-headed god in some tales. The younger brother was envious of Osiris and conspired with 72 people, including the Ethiopian queen. Together, they secretly and exactly measured Osiris' size. Oh, and we have those measurements. 8 cubits, 6 palms, and 3 fingers tall. Or, in a more modern measurement, 15 foot, 3 inches, or 4.7 meters. Yeah, he was tall. Using those measurements, they crafted a luxurious and decorated box. Then what do? You throw a party and invite a whole bunch of guests. Even Osiris returned from India, but Isis did not come. The box was the centerpiece, and a challenge was laid out. Whoever fit the box the best would get it. And guess who was the only person who fit the box properly? Yeah, the whole thing was staged. And as soon as Osiris lay down in the box, Set and his conspirators slammed the lid shut, hammered in nails before sealing it with molten lead. As Osiris was suffocating, set threw the box out into the Nile. Isis psychically sensed her husband's death. For months, she searched for her husband's remains and failed, until she learned from some children that it washed up in Byblos, and when she arrived, it was nowhere to be found. Prior to her arrival, a massive tree grew around the box, encasing it. The local king, Malkander, and the queen Athenis, or Astarte, heard of this tree, had it cut down to produce a pillar for their palace, and had no clue what was inside. Isis lamented her findings, but the queen's handmaidens heard her crying and came to find out what was happening. Now, Isis was disguised as a mortal for protection, but she still had a strong perfume on her, which clung to the handmaidens when they returned to the queen. When the queen heard of this beautiful woman down by the river, she went to inspect and spoke with the goddess unknowingly. Queen Athenis had a son cursed with an incurable illness. She offers Isis the position of her ill son's nursemaid, which she accepts. Isis sought to make the boy immortal by bathing him in fire. Now, of course, the queen found out, but was relieved when Isis's secret identity was exposed. And thanks for saving her son, she offers whatever Isis wants. And she is finally able to recover Osiris's body. But it wasn't perfect. Upon retrieving Osiris's remains, her grief was so strong that it caused another of the queen's children to die. This was an accident, no malice involved. Through great effort, she was able to temporarily revive her husband and laid with him. Thus, she became pregnant with Horus. Yet Isis cannot sustain Osiris any longer, and he dies. She calls upon Anubis, Thoth, and Nephthys, and the four of them mummify Osiris and bury him. He could no longer remain in the land of the living. They were said to recite a spell called the End of the Work, which was a lie. Yet Set was not done. In time, he found Osiris's mummy. Nephthys was guarding the remains in the swampy delta of the Nile. But when approached by her husband, she revealed the location of Osiris's remains. Yeah, she is a bit unreliable. More so when other stories are factored in. This time, he butchered the remains into 14 pieces and scattered them throughout Egypt. Isis would set out to find the pieces, but only found 13 pieces. The missing piece was his dick, which had been eaten by an alligator or a fish. Now Isis would refuse for this to happen again, and created 14 wax replicas and set them out. In some takes of the tale, Set finds and dismembers Osiris' body before he was resurrected. In those versions, Isis takes the form of a kite and draws Osiris' sperm, as such, to impregnate herself. Ultimately, it doesn't change much. Eventually, Horus would come and overthrow Set once growing up. Either Set is slain and forced to face judgment of his brother, but at most, he is just exiled. As for Osiris, he would pass to Duat, or the underworld. There, he would become the judge of the dead. Yep, he found a new job. It would be his responsibility to weigh your heart against the feather of Ma'at to decide your fate. If you are good, you may pass on to the underworld. But if your heart is too heavy with sin, you're fed to a demon known as Amit. It has a crocodile's head, a lion's body, and a hippopotamus's hind legs. That is a lot to go over. I think we should start with his final position. He was the judge and lord of the dead, but I am betting that most of you were thinking Anubis was the god of the underworld. and both are true. Anubis was in charge first, but after Osiris' resurrection. Afterwards, Anubis mostly oversaw the funeral rites and mummification. It is a little odd. Osiris took over ruling the earth from his father, but upon death, he would take over ruling the dead from his son. There is some complexity in how the Egyptians view the world that is best to cover. The concepts of Ba and Ka. Your Ka would be your physical body, while Ba is your mind and soul. Once your soul was judged and left the halls of the dead, it would be rejoined with your physical body, much the same as with Osiris. The day of Osiris' death is interesting, for it also marked the day which grain was sowed, often in fields meant to resemble Osiris. This brings up how a god is in charge of both fertility and death. Conceptually, bearing seeds is similar to bearing a body. The cycle of life and death is prevalent in many Egyptian myths, and we see this in the story. Remember how a massive tree sprang forth from the box which held his remains. Yeah, this is exactly the same thing. His power flowed out of the box and sprouted like a seed into a great tree. It is also the reason behind the green skin. It is the result of growth itself. After death, his skin blackened with rot, which makes sense, since it took months to find his remains. Now, there is the Book of the Dead. Yeah, that is a real thing, which contains the spells and rituals tied to mummification and death, though it mostly falls under the domain of Anubis. Though the dismemberment of Osiris does call back to the process of mummification. In such, we can see the organs removed, not limbs. Though how Osiris' body was divided isn't mentioned. It could be that his organs were removed. Sadly, there isn't enough to fully detail this. Still, I think you can see the connection. We do see some similarities with other myths. We see Isis trying to make a child immortal using fire. This is actually very similar to what we see with Achilles, isn't it? Oh, there are more. How many gods have traveled to foreign lands? Didn't Dionysus travel to India as well? And he was also a god of wine, a field which Osiris also covered, though they are different. Dionysus was more of a god of madness, while Osiris was a god which tamed the madness. And this brings up why the Egyptians focus so much on life and death. Prior to the reign of Osiris, Egypt was described as barbaric, uncivilized, and untamed. The people were little better than animals in many ways. This is actually similar to the tarot card for death. When you see it in the movies, they take it literally, but what it really means is change. A caterpillar must die to become a butterfly, so to speak. That is the true meaning of death. It is rebirth and change. In this case, it was the death of the uncivilized era, which allowed the birth of the grand civilization which was to come. We also see this again with his brother Set as he took over Egypt. Ultimately, it was Osiris' second death which brought forth Horus, so to speak, his final seed born to overthrow the usurper, a cycle which repeats often elsewhere in Egyptian mythology. We also see a similarity to Zeus, who frequently disguises himself, like Nephthys did, to seduce Osiris. Oh, you actually see this a lot with shape-shifting deities take a person's form so that they can sleep with their lover. Got to love these unknown affairs. We also have the prophesied birth of Osiris, similar to what we see elsewhere, such as the birth of Jesus. Yet, there is also a tie to the little drummer boy in Pamelides. It shouldn't be a surprise due to the close proximity of Israel and Egypt. though the Greek connections are a little bit more complicated due to distances. But the Greeks and Egyptians did trade, so stories could easily spread about. There is a fair bit with him, wouldn't you agree? The life of Osiris was tumultuous. From a destined birth, to a world traveler, to a king of the living, only to be betrayed and died. Then he comes back from the dead, and becomes the Lord of the Dead. He has done much, and continued to do a fair bit after his death. Yet, it wouldn't be a lie to say that he had much help, particularly from his wife Isis and his son Horus. Adam followed the crowd through the streets. They circled about before heading out to the fields. There they sowed the fields. Even Adam joined in the arduous labor. Finally, they laid the god beneath the ground. It was only then that he realized it was an effigy, and not the deity. Still, he couldn't help but feel there was more to this. Sweaty, he followed the villagers back inside. Looking back at the fields, he thought about what they had done. The tale of Osiris is complicated, to say the least. He spans life and death. Even after his demise, he had a few adventures and some tragedy to contend with. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time for The Horned Serpent. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.